Kia ora koutou, friends, and welcome to my October Q&A session, which is a regular feature I've decided to make as of now, basically. I think it is a fun thing to kind of get to know creators on YouTube. I really enjoy watching these, and if it's not your thing, that's cool. Just click off it. I will just go through a bunch of questions that have been sent in by viewers over the last month or so, and just have a bit of fun, basically. Completely unscripted, and I haven't even really looked at any of the questions, so this is going to be a surprise for both you and me. I just want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who did submit questions. Really, really appreciate it. I know it can be kind of daunting sometimes asking random people on the internet things. Well, at least I find it that way. I know some people have no issue just saying whatever the hell they like to random people on the internet. But I appreciate it nonetheless. It's very cool to see so many responses. I got 14 this month, which is super awesome, and I'm just going to crack into it. So we're going to start off with a question from Wonder Biscuit, who sent in 3 questions. So first one is, as much as I love all the races we have, including the sprints, I think there are too many. Teams, drivers, and all staff need a break. What would be a good number of Grand Prix, in your opinion, to have to give everyone a better work-home lifestyle? This is something that often comes up in various different F1 spaces. And when you read any stories from people who have worked in Formula One, they do often say that it is very, very difficult to maintain a normal life when you are one of the track personnel, basically. That it destroys marriages, you never see your children, you don't see your friends. Obviously, you're working every second, or like sometimes obviously 3 weekends in a row. So when you are at home, your friends and family are at work or are busy or are tired from the week. So it is one of those things where when you get into a sport like this, you need to be aware of how difficult it is. Having said that, I think 24 races is too much. And as much as I do think from a viewing standpoint that more sprints is fine, like whatever, it does put more pressure on the teams, especially if there's a crash in the sprint and they have to then get it ready for qualifying. Yeah, I don't know. I think 19 or 20 is good. So when you think about that, that's kind of, if you have a 9-month season, that's roughly every other weekend, like it kind of used to be back in the early 2000s and the 90s. So yeah, I would say 19 or 20 would be kind of good. I think it's enough to give all of the fans a bunch of stuff to watch every year, but it does leave a little bit more room for a reprieve in between weekends for the teams. It's one of those things. I would love to work in Formula One, but I've also worked in high pressure jobs that involve working across entire weekends. So it's not easy, and it does kind of destroy your life in a way. Next one from Wonder Biscuit. I remember not that long ago, years not months, that teams were complaining about needing to develop technology in F1 that would be transferable to road cars. This always irked me, as I don't know any cars where you can change the brake bias via a knob on the steering wheel, etc. What would you deem it acceptable to remove from the driver's control, as it isn't implemented in road cars, not including any safety stuff, obviously? The thing about F1 is that it's not kind of all the knobs and buttons and brake bias and stuff like that that translates into road cars. Or it kind of does, I suppose. Like, if I think about it, like my Subaru has 3 different modes, and no, they're not, like, it's not me directly controlling the brake bias on any individual axle, but it does change the suspension settings and stiffens things up and changes the way that the car reacts and changes the gearing and changes even my ability to make the turbo make a wastegate noise, So it's F1's kind of technological development into road cars isn't so much about all of those little intricate high performance details. It's more about how some of the more kind of experimental and kind of prototype technologies will then in 10, 12, maybe even 20 years time filter down into something that is relevant to road cars. So I think part of what makes Formula One is the ability for the driver to control the car in such a minute detail, down to these kind of minutiae. Yeah, so I actually don't think I would remove anything, to be honest, because I think part of what makes these guys such high performance athletes is the fact that their cars are so effing complicated that they need to have so many more skills than just being able to drive good, basically. They need to really be able to think on their feet. They need to be smart enough to understand the complexities of how the vehicle reacts under certain conditions with certain settings, that kind of thing. And I think that's part of what I enjoy about Formula One, is that it's not just a bunch of meatheads, you know, like they have to actually have some intelligence there. And that, I think, is part of what sets F1 apart from a lot of other sports, is that it involves so much more brain power than it does just physical capability. But that was a really great question, though, that really kind of makes you think about what kind of you like about motorsport in general. Yeah, really interesting thing to think about. And the final one from Wonder Biscuit: given how popular the bonus for fastest lap was with most people, in my humble opinion, did F1 make a mistake removing it? Shouldn't they just have opened it up to all drivers, not just the top 10? The thing about the fastest lap point is I kind of like could go either way on it. I do kind of think that it should have been open to all drivers, and this is a bit of me being a bit of a chaos merchant. I think if you opened it up to all drivers, what you're going to then create, obviously, is a bunch of people down the back who are going for fastest lap because they're not going to score any points, all potentially getting in each other's way, and also potentially getting in the front runner's way, because if they're in the process of being lapped, then that can create a whole big mess. So from the chaos angle, I think that could be fun. I don't think it will work. I think there would be too many moments where, you know, as much as like there'd be too many moments where potentially it might cause like people not acting in the best way on track, trying to get that point. I think the only way that this works is if F1 implements the IndyCar point system, essentially, with points all the way down to the back. And I am still a big proponent of that. I think that having every position being worth points will actually change the way that people race and change the way that certain races can play out. I think that having something to fight for other than just keeping your seat is kind of interesting. And of course, obviously, it will mitigate things like what happened last year in Brazil, where Alpine scored a whole bunch of points and leapfrogged up the championship tables because of their double podium. Like having points all the way down to essentially the second to last finisher on the road, or the last finisher on the road if there's DNFs, would kind of create more of a balance with how things work out. And the main downside to it would be obviously teams that are struggling wouldn't be able to target specific races for good results. But I mean, they kind of already can't do that because the top four are taking up, in most instances, not always, obviously, this year's been a bit different, those top 8 slots. So yeah, I think if fastest lap did go all the way down to the back of the grid, if they brought it back without changing the point system, I think that would be potentially pretty chaotic. I'm not saying it wouldn't be fun, but there's potential for chaos there. So thank you, Wonder Biscuit, for those 3 questions. Very thought-provoking. Really enjoyed thinking about those. Next up, we've got one from Ash Custom Works. End of an era prediction. Who will be the last driver to use DRS before it disappears into the history at the end of the season? I feel like this is one of the kind of things that you need to have a sweepstakes on, because it could be just about anyone, right? Like if somebody has a bad race, if somebody like has an accident and ends up way at the back, if like there's safety cars at the end, and like who knows? I'm just going to throw it out there and say an Alpine, Pierre Gasly. But it is definitely one of those things where you could just about just take bets on, and everyone apart from the absolute front runners would be probably on the same odds. Yeah, so thank you, Ash. Good question. Not something I have any idea how to answer. Next question is from an anonymous user. Do you think the 2021 season gave fans an inflated view of what a title fight should be? Yes. So obviously with 2021, we were coming off the back of COVID lockdowns and everyone watching Drive to Survive, and a whole bunch of new fans coming into the sport who might have seen 2020, which was a bit of a weird year, but definitely a lot of them, 2021 was the first year that they ever watched. And for it to be such an intense fight between two drivers from two different teams, two of the greatest of all time from two different teams, very much, I think, gave a lot of people an inflated view of what F1 is. And that's why I think we hear more and more complaints constantly of, oh, this is really boring. Oh, F1's got so boring. Oh, it's just the same people all the time. Blah. It's always been like this. There's just been these outlier seasons like 2021, like 2012, where there have been multiple teams fighting at the front. But that was kind of the first year that reliability wasn't so much something that was going to potentially make or break somebody's season, right? Before the turbo hybrid era, before those engines became incredibly reliable, the V8s, the V10s were incredibly unreliable and would just blow up all the time. So part of why we had some of these seasons where it was a tight battle between multiple drivers in multiple constructors is because the reliability was a thing. And it's kind of not now. Like, we obviously still do see breakdowns, we still do see failures, but not to the amount that we used to back in the day. And I think that's part of also what it was, is because there were two pretty reliable cars. Generally, if they DNF'd, it was because they crashed into each other. It was a really intense season. You had this young upstart who had a massive amount of talent but not a lot of patience. You had Lewis, who was, one of the old guard at the time and generally regarded to be already pretty much the greatest that had ever done it. And it was this kind of combination of factors combined with everyone suddenly getting into Formula One because they'd watched this reality series that created this a massive amount of hype that unfortunately immediately following that, things kind of fell off a cliff sort of halfway through the 2022 season and things kind of settled back to normal. So yeah, I do think that it did give fans an inflated view of what a title fight should be. F1 is a slow burn in most instances, right? It's not always going to be blockbuster. There's always things that are going to make races interesting that aren't necessarily overtakes, and you need to choose how you want to watch F1. I love it because of the strategy, the technicalities and everything, not so much like, I still love the racing, obviously, but all of the other stuff I think is probably what makes me love it more, as I kind of touched on when it comes to like driver capacity and what they need to know how to do and what skills they need to have. It's the whole package. It's not just who's fighting who. But yeah, good question, Anon. Thank you very much for sending it in. Next up, what gear do you use to film your videos? I see you have the DJI mic mini, but what about the camera, computer, software, etc.? That is from Angelina F. I have a Lumix G85 with I usually use a 25mm lens with a 1.8 f-stop. That's what I'm filming on now. Sometimes I just use the kit lens that it comes with, the zoom lens. It just depends on like what kind of angle I want to film at. I have ring lights. I have obviously the DJI mic mini. I also usually use this, which is an auto prompter. So this here holds my phone. I have an app that has my script on it that reverses everything so that it's right in front of my lens and comes through. So when I'm reading off a script, I'm looking at the lens. It used to be this. Which is a $4 fabric box from the warehouse with a $2 frame in it that I used to hold on my tripod with clamps. And thanks to my patrons, I was able to upgrade to this $40 one from Temu that works a lot better. honestly, one day I might get a really good one. I probably won't. This works perfectly fine. In fact, the other one worked fine. It was just really annoying to set up and it used to frustrate me and like fall over quite often. So yeah. What else? This is my laptop. It is an Asus VivoBook and I use Premiere Pro to edit my videos. I use Photoshop to make my thumbnails. I already have Adobe Creative Suite because I use it for my art, and Biscuit uses Audition for his music. So we're already paying for it. I would say if you are interested in getting into YouTube, just honestly get what's the free one? DaVinci Resolve, is that one free? I can't remember. There's a free really good editing software. You don't need to have Premiere. I only have it because I already have Creative Suite basically. So yeah. One thing I would say is if you are looking at getting into making videos, you do want something that has a relatively powerful like graphics processor. Mine has an RTX 4050 in it, so it is a more expensive laptop. But again, I use it for other stuff, not just making YouTube videos. So yeah, it's not like I've invested a bunch of money into something for YouTube because I already had all this stuff. Something to consider that you can't really edit videos on your, $450 Chromebook. So what else do I have? That's pretty much it. Camera, microphone, the auto prompter, you don't need that. It just makes making videos more efficient. I have really limited time to film stuff. Like I only have Tuesdays and Thursdays basically to make videos, and that means scripting, filming and editing and posting and making the thumbnail. I have to do all in the space of essentially sort of 6 hours. So like the more efficient you can make that, the better. For me, that efficiency comes from writing a script, having an auto prompter, and then reducing my editing time, basically. There's probably way more information than you wanted or needed, but that's the stuff that I use. And kind of tangentially to that, just to kind of get all of those technical questions out of the way, I suppose, we've got one here from Pete. Hey, Kimmy, love the channel. Was wondering if you have any goals for the future, and out of sheer curiosity, as I'm thinking about starting my own F1 YouTube channel, how much do you make from ads? My goals for this channel, one, have fun. I started this channel specifically just so that I could talk about F1 because really the only person I can talk about F1 to is my partner. Biz and I are both really into F1, but nobody else that we know, close to us anyway, is into Formula One. The only other person who's into F1 that we know really is his dad. He does not live in the same town as us. Biscuit's parents don't live in the same town as us. So when we see them, it's as a group. Mum's not really interested in F1, so we don't really get to talk about it much to Dad either. So yeah, basically I started this channel specifically to be able to talk about F1 and just kind of ramble about it. My goal now is to make enough money every year to go to one Grand Prix. And that isn't even paying for everything. I just want to make enough money every year to pay for the flights to go to one Grand Prix. That's it. That's my goal. And as for how much I make off ads, nothing. I don't make anything off ads. My channel has not yet reached that point of monetization. I know that sounds insane. It's a 2-year-old channel. I've got over 100 videos. It's hard work. You need to be prepared to grind for a long time. And you might get that lightning in a bottle moment where one of your things goes viral. I actually had, I think it was my very first video, had a heap of views. But that's kind of YouTube testing out to see who your audience is. Like it tests out things all the time. And unless you really kind of, I would say probably get shared somewhere more broadly, like on Reddit, or YouTube figures out really quickly who the audiences for your videos, it can take a really, really long time. So I'm at 2 years now. I obviously have partial monetization because I have the ability to do super thanks. I don't have subscriptions turned on here. I prefer Patreon for that just because YouTube takes quite a big cut of subscriptions. I just would rather it be on Patreon where it feels a little bit more personal. But yeah, I make no money off ad revenue. I think that might change this week though. I have a feeling that I'm going to hit the watch hours threshold this week. And when I do, it'll probably be in the cents every day and certainly not in the dollars. So just be aware that YouTube is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It is hard work. It takes a lot of your time, and you really need to care about what you're talking about to even get through to the point where you might start making a little bit off it. Not to burst your bubble or anything like that. Who knows? You might be one of these people that posts their first video and just immediately gets monetized within a month or so, starts making coin, is able to go full time. That's not me. I'm not that channel, obviously. And if you do, that's freaking awesome. Well done. I would be super proud if that would have happened. But yeah, it's a grind. You just got to make sure that you're having fun doing it and that you're doing something that you love. So yeah. So thank you, Pete, for that question. Oh my God. I've had to start this one 3 times because people keep on making loud car noises outside my window. Okay, next up. This one's from Daryl. Hi, Kimmy. Hope you and Biz are well. We are. We're really good. Thank you. Do you watch any other motor racing series outside of F1? And what motor racing event outside of F1 would you like to go to? What do you think about the movable front wing elements? Oh, I'm going to address that first question. I don't have time to watch other racing series, really. Sometimes on a Sunday, if I'm not doing much, I might put on the motorsport show on Channel 3 and just kind of watch whatever's going on there. I actually started out being more of a fan of rally than F1 back in the 90s. So, like, for me, it was Possum Bourne and even Carlos Sainz Sr. Like, I remember still watching him back in the early 90s because I grew up with only one TV channel. Quite often, racing was all that was on. But yeah, I just don't have time to watch other series, unfortunately. I do like to try and watch F1 Academy, though, just because I think that that's an important thing for me personally to support, considering how important I think it is for girls to have more visibility in racing and be aware that it is something that they could get into. Also, Daryl goes on to say, what do you think about the movable front wing elements? My concern is the front wing is the most vulnerable part of the car, and you don't get a race where someone does not get damage. Will we see front wing damage now causing retirements, as putting a new nose on the car is potentially a much longer process, and unlike the tyre temperature sensors on the wing, which are passive, the movable elements are not and would require a car system reboot, which will take around 20 seconds. Oh, yeah. I think they'll figure it out. It's one of those things that I think it's going to evolve over the course of probably the first half of the season. Obviously, the regulations are the regulations. They're not going to change, but I haven't really read enough about like the sensor positions and how the change or how a change of front wing would affect all the various components of what is going on there. So I can't really answer that with any kind of like informed authority. But I do just think that just like any regulation cycle, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to crop up, not just in testing, but in the first couple of races. And the teams will kind of figure out workarounds and there will be adaptations to the regs when they realize that certain things aren't really working that well. At the end of the day, I don't know enough. I haven't studied enough about this just because I haven't really had the time to sit down and properly read a lot of the finer points. But I can see there being a lot of issues at the start that hopefully will be resolved like early on in the season rather than taking a year or two to kind of figure out. And just a final note from Daryl, on a side note, awesome to see Laura Villas running for president of the FIA. Yes, she is, but she's not really. This is something that like has been highlighted in the last day or so. MBS is effectively running unopposed because there are rules in place around how people are allowed to run and what kind of support they need to have and who they need to have as part of their essentially their leadership team. And unfortunately, Mohammed bin Sulayem has got the only person from Central and South America behind him, aka Eccleston the Younger. So yeah, it was really awesome to see her put her hat in the ring, and it's a real shame to find out that basically it's all going to come to nothing. The level of corruption at the FIA is currently rivaling that of FIFA, and it needs to be fixed. Allegedly. So anyway, thank you, Daryl, for those questions. Really appreciate it. Right, this one is from Yoda. Did your passion get started from motorsport racing yourself, Kimmy? If you could do one race in any form of motorsports, what would it be? I'd love to do Dakar. I actually didn't even have a driver's license until I was 34. I lived in like places where it was just walkable. To be fair, as a child growing up, I did help my dad fix cars a lot, and the only thing that was on TV quite often was motorsport. So the reason why I got into motorsport is because I really love cars. I know the idea of loving cars and not having a license until you're in your 30s sounds kind of insane, but like it's needs must money, pay hundreds of dollars a year to park outside my own house kind of situation. So we just never owned a car until we were in our 30s. But I did help my dad fix our cars growing up. We always had old bangers. It wasn't unusual for me to be like shoulders deep under the bonnet of our crappy old Mazda 323. And then, go inside, and the only thing that would be on telly would be B-Rally or supercars or sometimes F1. So that's how I got into it. If I could do any race in any form of motorsport, what would it be? I think Bathurst. I know that that's a real Kiwi answer, but Mount Panorama is such an awesome circuit, and I'd love to drive that like in anger one day. It wouldn't even have to be in a race. I'd just love to go out there in my car or like a car like it and have a go. That looks like a hell of a lot of fun. And again, it's something that I kind of grew up watching. So the nostalgia factor, I think, is a thing there as well. Also, it's Bathurst this weekend. So, in case you've forgotten, I'm sure you haven't if you're into supercars. So thank you for that, Yoda. Okay, the next one is from JD Foley. If you would make an F1 movie, what would be your version of it if you made it? I can't tell you that because I am currently writing a book. So let's just say that if I were to make an F1 movie, it wouldn't actually be about F1 and leave it at that. Yeah. But yeah, I can't really say much without kind of giving away the base kind of concept and plot of the book that I'm currently in the process of writing. So thank you for asking the question. I really wish I could talk about it, but I can't. Yeah. So thanks, JD. That reminds me that I probably need to get cracking on doing some writing, which I've been really slack on recently. Next up, we have one from Tara from Southampton. Which track that's no longer on the calendar is your favourite, and why would you bring it back if you could? Kia ora. This is such an easy thing for me to answer. It's Sepang. That's it. I love Malaysia. I really, really wish that we could have Sepang back on the calendar. It would be so cool to be able to do a double header with KL and with Singapore. It's such an awesome circuit. And the only reason why it's not on the calendar anymore is basically because the organisers didn't want to do a Grand Prix there anymore, which was a decision that was made before before Formula One exploded and became this kind of crazy thing that it is now. This was back when they would still struggle to sell out certain circuits, and that's not the case anymore. And I think that there's a real case to actually bring Malaysia back. You just have to convince them to want to do it, and obviously probably figure out which track to drop instead. But yeah, definitely 100% Malaysia. I love that circuit so much, and I really, really miss it. And I don't know, it's had some classics. Yeah, 100% Malaysia. Easy thing for me to answer. And another one from Tara. Who is your pick for the champion who never was? A driver who could certainly have won a championship if they hadn't spent their career driving a tractor most of the time. I guess the obvious answer is like Sterling Moss or even Gilles Villeneuve, because it's not just about whether or not you were driving a crappy car. It's also like whether or not you survived. But I think you need to also I would rather think about more contemporary drivers than people from back in the day, because I think it's a very different kettle of fish than it was even in the 90s now. So I guess my answer for that would be probably Rubens Barrichello. That is me showing my bias, because some of you probably, I don't even know if I've ever said this, but Rubens Barrichello is my favorite Formula One driver of all time. I have a massive amount of bias there. So yeah, I would say Barrichello, or also that guy, you can't see it. Daniel Ricciardo, I think, is probably the greatest example of somebody who, Barrichello obviously wasn't driving a tractor. He was just number 2 to one of the GOATs. Daniel Ricciardo is probably a pretty obvious answer from the more modern era. Just you kind of look at his record and see what he was achieving during the Mercedes dominance era, and even what he did in 2020 in a Renault. And you have to kind of say this is a guy that, had he been driving one of the more dominant cars, he probably would have obliterated the field at the time. So yeah, I would say Rubens Barrichello and Daniel Ricciardo if we're thinking about drivers from the last 25 years. Yeah. So thank you for that one, Tara. This one is from Marion Green. When listening to drivers' radio comms with their race engineers, there are a lot of coded interactions that represent things that a driver has to do to change the setup of the car or carry out a particular strategy. What are some of the more significant of these? Are they kept deliberately obscure? I figured out the box one fairly early on. There are coded messages, but they're not actually like coded. They're literally just telling them like strategy modes, settings for their brake bias, various different things that are like so technical and beyond the average viewer's understanding that it can seem coded, but it's actually not. It's literally just telling them like how they need to change the minutia of the car to perform best in certain areas of the track with certain fuel loads, with tires in a specific condition. That's what it is. The coded messages are when you start looking at things like what strategy they're on, which of course if your Ferrari is anything from A to potentially X, Y, or Z. And that's just to make sure that other teams don't know exactly when they plan to stop. So if you've got a driver gets a message that said we're on plan A plus 10, that means that their target lap that they discussed previously plus 10 more laps. So if their target lap that they discussed for a stop at the start of the race or before the race was lap 20, then target plus 10 means that we're going to stop on lap 30. What do you think about that? It's pretty straightforward. It's just to make sure that other teams don't know specifically when they're going to be able to undercut them or when they're expecting to come in and bail out of like waiting for a safety car or red flag, that kind of thing. So it is pretty straightforward. It's when you're kind of getting into like, especially with McLaren recently, like a lot of what they say on the radio, it's very much kind of up in the air as to whether or not they're coded messages about what their rules of engagement are, that kind of thing. That's a whole different kettle of fish. That's driver management and team culture, not so much strategy. But yeah. Box is a nice, easy one to understand. Thank you, Marion. It's always really good to get questions that coming from people who are still learning about F1, because we all are, let's be honest. There's so many things. You might have been watching it for 40 years and there's still things that are changing and evolving and things that'll crop up and you go, I don't know about that. That's really interesting. So yeah, thank you for that question. And finally from Noble, can you take us on a tour of the stuff on your wall? Sure. I'll use my phone to do that, shall I? I need to clear my lens. It's a little bit grubby. I have See You Next Tuesday, which has got some photos of me and Biz when we've been at events or in other countries, and that there's all my wristbands from Singapore last year, and also that there is a ticket for Haw Par Villa, which is a very, very cool theme park in Singapore, and that there is a coaster from Spargo up the top of Marina Bay Sands. We've got a little Williams and a little Aston Martin. No, it's not a stake. That is the Lego Aston Martin. A F1 car made out of laser cut wood. This is the lamp that we got off Temu when we were seeing what kind of junk we could buy off there. That poster is also from the Temu haul. I know it's bad. But you know, it was for a video. Again, that one there, and that is also, so they're all from that haul. And then this painting is one of mine. I did that after Daniel got fired. Just got a few quotes of his on there. And yeah, I would consider selling it as a print. But because it's kind of a little bit iffy on the intellectual property factor, that one just stays here in my office and is just for me. I haven't actually launched it yet, officially, but I have kind of started a website to sell my artwork and do some little motorsport related designs. If you are interested in going and checking that out, it's just kimmy.nz. I don't really have a lot on there at the moment. I'm kind of working on getting a lot of my older pieces up. Some of them are 20 years old. Yeah, so selling prints, it is all print on demand kind of stuff just because it is prohibitively expensive for me to send stuff from here. And obviously, I'm not a wealthy enough person to be able to spend thousands of dollars on getting stuff printed. So I have to pay $28 for me to send you an A4 print, which is how much it would literally cost. from here to send it to somewhere like the UK, and B, like it's just easier, like inventory management, that kind of thing. So yeah, if you are interested, kimmy.nz, I will be putting up some original works on there as well eventually, but at the moment it's just print on demand from some designs that I've done and also from a painting that I did recently. A recent one, not one that's 25 years old. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you so much to everyone for sending in questions. I really appreciate it. I will put a link down in the description box for next month's video. As always, just the rule is don't be a dick. I will answer non-F1 related questions, but I do prefer F1 related questions. So if I get a lot, then those will be prioritized. Like if I get sort of 10 to 15 like I did this month, then I will try and answer them all. As I say, I know that these kind of videos aren't for everyone, but I think like getting to know the YouTuber is something that I'm really interested in. I know that it's probably something that some of you guys are. If you're still watching, you probably are. And I always have the option for you to send in questions anonymously if you're too shy to like put your name to it, which honestly, I'm too shy most of the time to put my name to those kind of things. So I totally get it. I give you that option. Anyway, that's it for me. Please make sure if you are new here and you enjoy my style of presentation, subscribe to my channel, like the video. Huge thanks to my patrons, as always. If you're interested in joining my Patreon, then the link is down in the description. You also get 15% off my store if you do that, as well as access to my championship calculation spreadsheet. That's it. That's all I've got. Ka kite. I'll catch you next time.